This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John. This episode's guest is Frankie Mish, the drummer for Sleepwaker, whose latest album, Alias, is out now via UNFD Records. The irony, up until I got the record itself, CD, thanks to Amy over at Adam Splitter PR, I didn't realize that Alias was an acronym for All Love Is a Sound. So there's a little bit of tidbit of information for you, but yeah, this feels like a long time coming, actually. A lot of bands from here in Grand Rapids, Michigan have been getting signed by UNFD Records and just getting signed as a whole. With Hollowfront being signed to UNFD, Sleepwaker getting signed. I think there's a couple more, actually, that I'm blanking of now that I'm trying to talk about it. But this was actually kind of fun because this band and Frankie and I have actually played here in my basement. We talk about that a little bit in the chat itself. But it was one of those things where it's kind of interesting at times to see the bands that kind of are able to traverse through being a local band and kind of just make the right moves to become a bigger band, or a baby band as it's kind of known in the industry a little bit. But, you know, we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of that. And it was kind of interesting because Sleepwaker is a band that I've been aware of, obviously with the fact of them being here, local to me, but it was almost like when Greta Van Fleet got signed and kind of started having some success. I was like, I know of you, but I haven't really seen you doing something so drastic in my eyes where it's like, man, you're getting on every big package. You're selling out, you know, these rooms by yourself. You're becoming a juggernaut of the local scene and then expanding and touring and doing, you know, just really great, crazy numbers to where the music industry is and labels are going to take notice of you. And I guess that's kind of the difference in my mentality, really, like, and in talking with Frankie is just, it's kind of not necessarily like that anymore. Like, you can get by, I don't want to say get by, that's the wrong phrase. You can have success and just work on your craft and have a relationship that you built with a label or with an A&R person and essentially grow your band. And I don't want to say have to bypass some of the things because Sleepwaker is definitely put in the work, you know, as far as being a live band, but it's just one of those, like, where I think of the days of, like, the Still Remains and the Haste the Days and stuff from, you know, when I was coming up in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and those bands would tour all over the U.S., and they built a reputation for themselves and kind of had a fan base kind of built in. And I guess it's not necessarily like that anymore. So it is kind of fun getting to talk to some of these newer bands and with the age difference that there is between us and just kind of getting to know more about how things are happening and what's kind of going on, especially given, you know, this one where they're here local to me. And I feel like I kind of have a pulse on what's happening in our local music scene, but there's also, it's just good to know, like, kind of what how things really are, and to learn kind of how even my own local scene is adapting to things. How there are still similarities between how I grew up, where, it was a musical scene, it was a handful of bands that were, ride or die for each other and so forth. And I feel like a lot of that's lost. I feel like I say in the chat, like there's just so much infighting and backstabbing and so forth, and everyone's just kind of out to get what they think they can get off of somebody else, and it's not even about camaraderie or building a scene anymore. And it's just so foreign to me that potentially that's how it is. And like I said, my time in booking shows, that's kind of what led me to get out of our local industry, kind of, as it were. But Sleepwaker is a really interesting band. Definitely one that has a lot of interesting things going for them, from just the concept of the band in name, and the lyrics and the presentation that they put out, and just how everything seemingly is so perfectly curated based on what they want, and just kind of where they can take the ideas that they have in its infancy stages right now of being a band, and where they could go. So it's just kind of an interesting time period. Speaking of local, I am going to, if I can get it open, there we go. I'm going to crack open a New Holland Brewery Coastal Dreams 2021. This is a milkshake IPA with pineapple and marshmallow fluff. This, when I had it at the tap room, I was like, I need this in a can. I need to take it home. I need to drink a lot of these because it's just so delicious. So the thing I like about this versus some of the other, like, milkshake IPAs are kind of my thing. Like, it's inherently what I will, if I see one on a menu, I'll probably drink it, regardless of what flavor profile. But the thing I like about this, and the ones that I think are better to me, is, so with the pineapple, it kind of complements the bittery kind of IPA flavor that sort of naturally exists. But with the marshmallow fluff and stuff that usually has vanilla or marshmallow or something kind of more sweet like that, it really brings out that milkshake flavor with the milk sugars and the lactose and all that kind of stuff in these beers. And it's so delicious. It's so drinkable. And it's one of those that, like, it's sometimes can get you into trouble because you just don't realize how drinkable these are. And it's just one of those, like, I drank this and immediately was like, I need to go buy a couple cans, and I did. And this is the first I've really had and opened it since having it at the tap room. But it's a really great beer, and I think it's a perfect beer for this chat. It's kind of light. There's a lot of substance to it, and it's a lot of fun. And so I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Frankie and I, and I'll talk to you guys on the other side of it.
We played, it was Seraphim, Drifter, and Sleepwaker, and then a couple, like, Indiana bands. Relics was actually one of them. Not Relics. What was that band name? It's like Aries.
Oh, okay.
And,
I was actually just trying to look it up to see, like, how long ago that was, because I was like, God, how long ago was that?
Yeah, I think that was, like, it would have been 4 years, I think, around there. Because I think our album was out. Or no. It would have been 5. It would have been 5.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think you guys had a show at Pyramid Scheme shortly there, at, like, within a week. Or you had just played Pyramid Scheme, one or the other. But it was one of those where I was like, I know you guys played here, but, like, I couldn't remember in what capacity it was. And on top of that, as I was kind of going through and reading the band's the bio thing in the press kit, so I think it's your bass player, I'm trying to remember, Jake, is that it?
He's the bassist was the bassist of Seraphim. Now he's the guitarist in our band.
Okay. So you may know this more than me, but I think I worked with his brother. Does he have a brother, Anthony?
Oh, Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, yep.
In
Okay.
Pelletary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's not a very common last name, let alone to come from
No.
this area. So I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder if that, like, because we used to call him Impy, him and Kozatek used to be two of my employees when I worked at A&W. So I was like, there's no fucking way that's not Anthony's brother. Like, but I don't remember him ever being like, oh, my brother like plays music or anything like that, because that's something when people find out I'm into music, if they know anybody or have family that's into music, they're like, oh, my friend or my brother or someone plays. And I'm like, okay, cool. Has no bearing on me. So, kind of a proper introduction, talking with Frankie Mish, drummer, although you are more than just the drummer of Sleepwaker, but we'll get to that probably in a little while. Your new album, Alias, is coming out July 23rd via UNFD or Unified. I've talked to a lot of the people on the label, and everyone's like, it's UNFD, it's Unified, it's kind of whatever you want to say. But I've had this record for about 2 weeks now, I think, and gotta say, I mean, first of all, congrats. It's a fucking monster of a record.
Thank you.
But the thing that, kind of right away that has always kind of drawn me to your band and what you guys are doing, that's kind of put you a step above, here in the local Grand Rapids scene, was I feel like you guys always, from the jump, wanted to be more than just a token, metalcore band or progressive metalcore band or whatever, that you always had a little more depth to you. I mean, even starting with the name, with Sleepwaker, and, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that it kind of stems from you kind of going through insomnia and stuff like that, and kind of all of you taking influences from dreams you've all had and kind of parlaying that into tentative sort of concept records, basically, around those dreams and so forth that you're having.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I kind of want to start there, because insomnia is something that I have had, but I don't think it's ever really been diagnosed. But I, was talking to my parents the other day, and, they were like, well, what's an average night's sleep for you? And I was like, well, I mean, average to function, or like average, like this is just what I get. And they're like,
yeah.
To get. And I was like, oh, I might get like 4 hours of sleep. And, that's why I started, smoking weed before going to bed, because it would actually allow me to just sleep and have a good, consistent night's sleep without waking up. But it was one of those, like, where it's interesting, this concept of what is normal, and how you just put it right across the board for everyone, when I don't think anyone is normal, and what works for you won't work for me, and we'll have completely different experiences within. So what has your insomnia been like for you to kind of traverse through, and kind of talk about how you came to talking about it with your bandmates and kind of making it sort of the foundation of the band?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we went in to do our first record and everything, or our first song, actually, we were kind of like talking about band names and everything, because we had Sleepwaker already, but then I designed like a logo and all these different things, and I hadn't really talked to anybody about the name and like why I chose it. And Hunter, it was me and a guitarist at first, then we had asked Hunter to join in, so he came in, and then we were just kind of talking about it, and like I mentioned why I picked out the name and why I kind of liked it, and he was like, yeah, I've definitely had like issues with that too. And it was just something that was kind of a commonality. Like it was like, this is something that's interesting. Like everyone's experienced some issues with sleeping or something like that. And it definitely affects you in a big way when you are having those issues, especially. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was a cool way to kind of like connect to everybody, but it still kind of feels like exclusive a little bit, just to talk about like sleep. Cause it's something that people don't usually talk about. Like you have people say like, oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep last night, but they don't really like expand on that. They don't really say like, oh yeah, my dreams were this and this. It's kind of like a personal, like individual thing. Like I guess to relate to the album, it's like your personal identity kind of thing. Like no one experiences the same dreams and in the same way, which I thought was kind of cool. So that's one of the points to that. But like you said, my personal experience with it was definitely, I mean, when I was younger, I would come to school and I'd be like insanely tired, or like just didn't feel motivated or something like that. And I was always like I thought it was normal to like stay up late at night when I was like really young, and I would have like weeks of not really sleeping, and then a day of I'd sleep all day, like way too much, way too long. And it was just like me catching up basically. So I was prescribed melatonin, and it gave me horrible dreams and like nightmares and made everything feel weird. I was constantly having dreams that I was like stuck in a room and like couldn't find a way out, or I was having dreams that I was being chased or something. And it was definitely it was weird enough for me to be like, this is interesting in some way. Like I feel like I could make something out of this, like be creative instead of just like, sitting there and going, man, this sucks. So
I've recently started using melatonin because potentially going for a job interview here for something, and obviously can't, even though it's funny, even though it's legal, and you can literally go to a store and walk in and buy it, but like everywhere is just like, yeah, that's a thing, but no. But the hypocrisies of that aside, kind of switched to melatonin, and it's funny because no, I just do the OTC stuff. I don't know what the difference is between what you buy over the counter versus, getting it prescribed to you. I would assume like anything, higher dosage or whatever, or maybe it's more concentrated or something. But it's one of those where I've actually recently been talking to a lot of friends, and they're like, oh, I have such weird fucked up dreams when I'm on melatonin. And I'm like, yeah, really? Like, I don't. And it's, again, it's all subjective to whomever is taking whatever, and we're not all going to have the same experiences. But it's weird to hear, like your experience, that's more the common experience when you're on it versus mine. And I don't know, like, did they tell you like that was a possible side effect, is just like these wild ass dreams, or that the next day you could even be still having like I don't want to call it withdrawals, but almost like I've had people been like, I'm high as fuck the next day, basically. But
I've never had that.
Okay,
but yeah, I've just had like the weird dreams, and then the next day I'm like, either if I because melatonin doesn't really help. It doesn't necessarily help you get to sleep. It just helps you have deeper sleep when you are asleep.
Okay.
And at least that's what I've heard, but or what I've been told. But yeah. So it helps you like get deeper sleep, and that causes you to have more dreams or weirder dreams, or like you get your REM cycle. I think it like speeds up your REM cycle or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I'm not too versed in it. I just wrote a song about it. That's about it. But yeah.
Well, it's just kind of interesting because I feel like, I'm one of those people that like, even when I'm drunk, when I'm high, when I'm in like having crazy dreams, I'm like hyper aware that like when I took shrooms one time, I was at a bar that doesn't exist anymore, and I went to walk to go get a beer, and I just started laughing. And I remember my roommate at the time was like, "What's so funny?" And I was like, it's really dumb. I know I'm peaking right now. So like, I know it's a total high thought, and that's why I'm laughing at it. But I just became aware of the bottoms of my feet and the weight distribution of my body on the balls of my feet to the tips of my toes. And it's very interesting. And then he was like, right. And I was like, oh, I know. Total high thought. It's not funny if you're not me right now. And I know that. Same with like, I have some reoccurring dreams where sometimes like I'll go to run, but like suddenly I don't know how to run. And I run in exactly. Almost a standing still kind of thing.
Yeah. Or like the ground's like made of rubber, or like rubber bands or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's kind of weird that it's like, even in that moment, I'm like, this is a fucking dream. Like, wake up or whatever. And it's weird to be able to still have those cognitive thoughts, I feel like, when you're supposed to kind of be not thinking like in a rational sense of where you would be able to know what's going on. And, as you said, something that kind of really struck me was when you were saying, starting Sleepwaker and talking to, the your other bandmates about the experiences you've had with different things. I don't feel like that's something that people I feel like people your age, because you're like, I think about 7 or 8 years younger than me, I think. I feel like that's something your generation kind of, if I can say that, is really good at, is being able to talk through things a lot more and vocalizing things you guys are going through. Whereas I'm kind of more of the, just kind of
suck it up and yeah.
So
I've definitely had that conversation with a few people recently too about how I definitely feel like people older than me have definitely mentioned like, yeah, I don't really talk about dreams that much with like friends and blah blah blah. And like when I've mentioned the name and how it came up in like other interviews and stuff like that, people have said like, yeah, like I don't really talk about my dreams or like mention them or anything like that. And I think that's definitely but younger people, yeah, definitely. I definitely see that a lot more.
well, I was going to say, do you think that the willingness to talk about these things that may be uncomfortable to talk about for fear of being judged or whatever has strengthened your bond with your bandmates instantaneously to be able to open yourselves to be that for the people who are listening to your music for the first time?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Because I mean, it's a little more genuine than like the old metalcore, like we're all sad, we all get down, like it's okay to be unhappy, like that kind of thing. Like, not to say like that's bad or anything, but because it's a great message. But at the same time, it's a little bit more personal. It's not a this applies to so many people kind of message. It's a here's my personal experience. Take it how you want. Like it's not so much a we're telling you this works for everybody, like you mentioned before. It's like a hey, this is just experiences, and I think it's a cool thing to share and a somewhat personal thing that's not too intrusive to yourself, and it's something that you can easily make some cool art based on. Like I mean, if you see other any, I mean, we live in Grand Rapids. You've got Art Prize. You see all these artists that say like I had a dream about this and then I decided to create this, or like I had a dream that I made this, or blah blah blah. I think it's definitely a really cool way to share and express art in a way that's only like personal experiences rather than things that like everyone's gone through. But yeah, I definitely think it's strengthened the bond for the band, and it's definitely strengthened the fans and everything like that do like the concept and understand, because we get people sharing stuff with us all the time, and at shows and at online, things like that. Like I had a dream about X, or I had a dream just like the video in Melatonin, or like stuff like that. It's definitely really cool to hear.
How this always sounds kind of shitty when you try to talk through this, but I think it speaks to a bigger narrative. So I'll ask the question and I'll kind of give a context example. So I feel like your band is going to be primed for a lot more of that, a lot more people coming to all of you, probably specifically, your vocalist, Hunter, and, just kind of saying like, kind of unburdening themselves of the things that they're going through. And while that's really cool, and especially like, when you're a newer band and you're like, oh my God, people really like what we're doing and all this kind of stuff, and you're getting that instant gratification of the feedback, I don't know if people think about the long term of that, where you're like, every night when I'm on tour, someone tells me something, and then I have to like looking either for answers or just to unburden their own thoughts or whatever, like cut rate therapy, basically. And have you kind of thought about, or has it already happened to where you're kind of like, shit, I think maybe I need a little bit of help in dealing with this because I wasn't equipped, I guess, at this point to take on extra people's, emotional baggage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when it comes to shows, I'm usually pretty good about like dipping out behind the stage and packing up all that. I mean, I handle a lot of the, not to say I'm like avoiding anything or trying to get away. But yeah, I usually have drums to pack up, and I usually take care of our rack case, and it's a big rack case. And I love winding up the cables and just making everything look really nice at the end of the night before we leave, and packing up the trailer. So I'm usually off doing that. For the other guys, honestly, I think for now it's been pretty fun, like just kind of talking to people and hearing experiences and stuff. And I usually try to keep conversations pretty like not fast, I guess, but I guess more like I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to take as much time as we need to get like to talk about this. But if anything, we're more here to like help you vent and give you a space for that, rather and like let out emotions, like moshing, basically. but also we aren't really like we don't really know what we're doing. Like our songs are about like this weird thing happened, and here's our interpretation of that sonically. So I think when people have come up to us and kind of like let out everything, it's more like I really appreciate you sharing your story and feeling close enough to our music and inspired by us to, you know, express these emotions and these feelings and your hardships. And it's always great hearing about it. Like I will never, I won't ever stop someone from doing that, because I genuinely enjoy like hearing other people's perspectives and other concepts and things. And it's honestly made its way into our songs and music. And like, it's hard to write about only yourself, and it feels a little selfish to just put only your things into your music. So, yeah, I think it's something that I'm definitely interested to see. Like as things progress, I'm interested to see what happens and how people interact with us. But I'm open to it. I haven't gotten to that point yet of like, this is too much or I can't handle it. And if we do get to that point, then we'll be open and honest about it with everybody. Like we'll just try and be as nice and I guess, yeah, just open about our personal experiences and how we're feeling and whether or not we can handle stuff like that.
I just think it's kind of interesting. The more, you know, like something that kind of, and, you know, I've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, but, you know, you probably haven't heard it. So quick rundown, but it's like, I had an event happen to me where someone reached out to me with some real heavy shit. And then I realized I was like, fuck, like, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
I'm dealing with
someone else's baggage.
Yeah. Like, and the expectation that like, I'm supposed, like the feeling that I have to have the answers for this person to help them through and all that kind of stuff. And sort of as an empath, like you just take on so much stuff and you're like, well, now what do I do with it? And, you know, so like one of the stories I was going to say was like one of my tattoo artist friends. Like I remember talking to him and, you know, when we did a podcast, actually the first episode of this, you know, I had made the comment about him basically being a cut rate therapist and like, you know, how does he deal with it? And he was like, oh, like sometimes, you know, I go, cause you know, with all the tattoo shows, like everyone apparently has to have the worst story. Like, so my whole family was in a minivan and then it caught on fire and they blew up and they're all, I'd have no family. And this is what this is, you know, commemorating. And it's one of those where it's like, you know, now everyone just comes to you for like, to help you go through, to help them get through the worst things or these traumatic experiences. And in some cases, you know, it's a painful rite of passage of sorts, you know, when you get into some of these bigger, larger spots that suck. And, you know, he was kind of talking about how, you know, he would be tattooing someone and it would be like some older lady and it would be, you know, pretty big piece. And he's like, oh, so what is this for? What made you decide to get a tattoo finally? And then it's like, oh, my husband beat the shit out of me for the last 25 years and just was in a really horrible marriage. And I finally got out of it. So this is like, you know, my, you know,
empowerment. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I was like, well, what does that do to you when you go home? Like, cause you know, like that's your work day is like hearing and helping someone manage their past trauma. But now you have some of that. And now you're trying to go home to your, you know, spouse or girlfriend or whatever. And maybe their day was just like, oh, the dog shit on the carpet. And you're like, yeah,
it's not so bad. Like,
it's like, but then you kind of get this thing where it's like, do I even then tell you? because
Mm-hmm.
do I unburden the burden
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
just keep perpetuating it down the line? That it's like, at what point do we just not kind of do that to each other?
Yeah, yeah.
And so like
I
that led me to going, sorry, that led me to go into
Oh, go ahead.
therapy and just kind of basically realizing that when you, like, for me, I just constantly overthink and I will come up with
Mhm.
solutions to problems that haven't even presented themselves. And
Mhm.
that's part of why I have problems sleeping, is because my mind is just always thinking about things.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was one of my biggest things that I had to work through. But it's been interesting in talking to a lot of people. Like, I actually just saw a friend of mine on Facebook yesterday was like, so I'm trying to find a therapist. The person I had isn't working for me. They're fine, but just doesn't work for me. Any recommendations? And people are like, it was a really nice long comment thread of people being like, try this book, try this, go to this. And, you know, there's so many avenues now out there for people, that it's just one of those where I was kind of thinking about how music is that for a lot of people.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
for you as the musician, sometimes I feel like you're in the unenviable position that once you start kind of getting some notoriety, you then are now going to be burdened with not only the things that made the music or inspired the music, but
Mhm.
then all the things that manifest from there that people will come to you with. And
Yeah.
I just see that. I'm excited for you guys because I feel like, you know, you could be that next band for a lot of people in the heavy
Yeah.
scene that can help a lot of people and use your platform and partner with a lot of really cool, interesting places and go a lot of different routes with it. But I'm also just kind of like, ugh, this is,
Ye-
I'm also kind of worried for you at the same time. Like, I hope
Yeah,
it doesn't cause any problems down the road.
absolutely. My girlfriend's a social worker, so
Wow.
and she works at a women's shelter. So we've
Oh,
definitely had that conversation of like, and she can't talk about a lot of it because obviously, like, it's
yeah.
social work stuff. So yeah, it's definitely something that we've had conversations about, and I've definitely it's hard, for sure, to like to navigate a situation like that. Um, I think there are a lot of there have been tours where we were doing something really hard. We had a filling guitarist, and it was me and our bassist Aaron, and a Hunter, our vocalist too, and Aaron and I were the only two people that were driving the whole tour,
Mm.
and it was a rough tour, rough time. We had so many hiccups in the road, but we also there were points where it was like this person is having a rough day, or this person isn't feeling well, like they're gonna sit out from like the conversations, the merch table, like whatever. um so I think we've definitely within the band kind of managed that for sure. Like we don't ever try to like shoo people away if they want to have those conversations. But there, like, we have thought about how in the future it's hard to, have a line of people that want to talk to you, and you have an 8-hour drive ahead of you, and there's only 1 hour before you have to leave. Um, and like that's definitely something that we're gonna have to figure out how to manage. And I think it's definitely an important thing to uh, uh, keep in mind, especially with your own mental health on tour. Like, not even just a single show, but yeah, doing a string of shows and talking to those people. I absolutely, I'm excited to do it because I love hearing people's. Honestly, the reason we do a lot of the music we do is because write the lyrics we write is because we like it to be kind of open ended. So like, Bitter, for example, sounds like it's about addiction and vices and all these other things, but we've had people come up to us and say like, this related so much to my relationship, and like, or this related so much to X or Y or whatever. And that song is kind of like direct, but we have other songs that we've written more recently, like Lost in Dreams, where people are like, it just, that song was like related so much to my situation about being trapped, or like being stuck in the house I was in before, and I just learned like, oh, I have to move. And every time we have really heavy conversations, I always push people to seek help, somewhere local to them, or somewhere consistent, and somewhere that is a safe space for them to express their emotions and how they're feeling, and not push them away from expressing those to other people necessarily, but finding outlets that are welcoming of that kind of conversation.
Do you keep like sleep journals at all, or like dream journals?
I used to. I'm so terrible, so incredibly bad at keeping consistency in my life. I like my work schedule. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so my work schedule is like crazy, especially because of COVID and everything, just being locked in the house. And my roommate is freelance too. He's our producer, so like he's got bands coming in and working and stuff like that, and he doesn't really have a set schedule. It's like when I wake up and then when I go to bed. That's whatever time that is.
Right.
So, I have done a couple journals, but it's something I need to get back into. I used to have one that was next to my bed, but I ended up using it as a sketchbook and filled it up way too fast, which is the eternal problem when you're when you're an artist with a empty book. But yeah, I mean, I definitely want to get back into it because it was really cool. We got to kind of take some of those dreams and concepts and put them into our old songs. Like Lost in Dreams is specifically about a dream I had where I was stuck in a room and I could see everything changing outside and around me, but like I wasn't doing anything. It was almost, I took it as like, what am I doing with my life? Like I have to go out and do things, otherwise they're not going to happen. Like that's just kind of where we took that.
It's funny as you said that, talking about that song in particular. Mm-hmm. I took it more from a different song, actually, that one of my favorite bands, Every Time I Die, they were talking, Keith was talking about how, being a touring musician, you have these societal norms that get placed on you, like, oh, at this age, you need to like have a home, be married, have kids, all this kind of stuff. And he goes, and I'm trying to compare my life to those that don't live the same life I do. Mm-hmm. And while they would go, oh my God, but you get to travel, you get to do all these things, you get to see all these and have all these experiences. It's always the grass is greener on the other side kind of scenario where it's like, you want what you don't have. Mm-hmm. And so to me, as you were kind of saying like, oh, I could see all these things changing and all that kind of stuff around me, but I'm not, it was more of like, I was thinking about it being more like, oh, is it more like you see people achieving things and therefore you're like, oh, but I'm not, I'm still quote unquote stagnant doing what I'm doing, even though maybe what it is you're doing isn't something that you can notice success or whatever, or growth or whatever in such a short amount of time. Being an artist, I feel like your thing is like, here's the concept here, and I may not see it come to fruition and see the end product of the growth of me as a musician or as an artist or whatever until it's done, which can take a year or two. And it's constantly evolving. So I feel like that would be how I would almost interpret that, what you were saying, which I also feel to be very accurate.
Yeah. I mean, that's another aspect of the song that we also kind of like mentioned we wanted to put out, because like when I was writing it, that was my interpretation. But like when we were coming up with the final lyrics and everything and recording the vocals, that's kind of what Hunter and all the other members took. Was like comparing yourself to other people, and like, I mean, I do that. I feel like I kind of like seclude myself in my own bubble of success when it comes to my life, like my personal life, like owning a car, buying a house, etc. But when it comes to art, I am constantly comparing myself to other people. So I 100% empathize with that. Like having to, I guess my goal in life hasn't necessarily been to, right now, to think in the moment or think too far out. It's to kind of like, what am I going to be doing in 2 years rather than what am I going to be doing in 10 years or what am I going to be doing tomorrow? Like I'd rather think, 2 years out and plan out like a realistic goal. Because if I think too far, I start going like, oh man, like what if this doesn't happen, or what if X or Y or whatever, or what if I don't have enough money for whenever this happens. But so yeah, I've definitely, my parents have kind of always pushed that uh, uh, cars are that you'll never make money off of a car, versus if you invest in a house, that's important, like that's an asset, it'll make money, blah blah blah. And then other things too, like just, you know, being smart about where you are in life and understanding where you are too, and not making rash decisions. And yeah, so I'm slow to do things sometimes, but then sometimes I think about it, and for how old I am, I really have done a lot of things that I'm extremely proud of and excited to do more of. Like, for example, I right now I feel like I haven't accomplished a lot, but realistically,
who has in the last?
Yeah, exactly. Realistically, look at like a lot of people that are like 23, 24, they usually are about the same. Like they've just gotten out of college, like they're still kind of finding their place and everything like that. Like, I've gone on like 12 tours in my life, and like I've been on the road a lot, and I've been in every single state, and like I've been overseas and other places, like other countries and things. Like it's when you look at it that way, you kind of, instead of thinking about what you've accomplished and where you are right now, I kind of like to think about what's happened in the past and the experiences I've had and the things that have like helped me grow to be the person I am now, that is able to eventually, like, once I get a house or whatever, or a car or whatever. I mean, I have a car, but once I hit X milestone, I'll be like, cool. All of the things that I've done before have gotten me to this point now, and now I'm oh man, I'm losing it, but now I'm capable of doing this and being extremely confident in this decision, rather than, you know, rushing into something like getting married and then eventually having a divorce, or getting a tattoo and then regretting it, or like it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you can kind of like sit back and plan things out and kind of think things through. I kind of have, I guess I have that kind of mentality, but that's not to say that's the right one, and everyone else's ideas and concepts are the same. Value is mine. So,
well, I think that's kind of the thing, though, is, you know, it's funny, as you know, I'm 24 years younger than my parents, which isn't really that old. I mean, think about it, being 24 and having a child. You know, when I look back on my parents, you know, they were kids essentially when they had me. And it's one of those where I often now, as I get older, think about, okay, like I'm going to be 37 in a couple months. Okay, when my parents were 37, I was, you know, 13, 14. We were, you know, these things. I was kind of, you know, paralleling my life to my parents and trying to think of things. And it's funny because I feel like as I get older, my parents aren't these people who know everything. Now they're becoming people. And as I, you know, am able to open up more and have more of a discourse with them as an adult myself to them, and we talk about our shared experiences or things in general, or just, you know, having conversations, it's interesting to kind of break down them. And
absolutely, yeah.
What becomes interesting is the things my parents told me, or mainly I'll say my dad, where it was like, you need to go to college, you need to do these things. Well, they never set any money aside. I realized my senior year, I was like, I don't want to go to school. Like, I don't have any aspirations to go further. The things I'm interested in are oversaturated job markets, like, you know, psychology, being a teacher. Like, these things are just, that's what everyone wants to do. So why the fuck would I go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, go into debt where no one's going to make me go? So I probably won't go because not interested. And I would just rather go work and get real life experiences right away. Like, I was always kind of in a hurry to grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like the kind of Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
But I think that's the point for sure. Is like everyone's in such a rush to grow up and everything. And honestly, like I was thinking about taking a gap year when I was getting out of high school. But because I graduated a year early, so I was like, I could just take a gap year and like that would be my senior year. And everyone everyone that my parents were friends with kind of like tried talking me out of it. Well, I guess talked me out of it because I ended up not doing it. But I also got into Kendall, the art school in Grand Rapids, and I figured this is a good experience and it's something I want to do and I know I'm passionate about. So I just went for it. But like at the same time, I was kind of like, you know, pressured. I felt a little bit of pressure. My parents weren't necessarily doing it, but just other people saying like, oh, well, you could get ahead in this or this or this. And it's like, yeah, but I'm not in a rush to grow up. I'm more interested in like going out and experiencing a lot of things right now. I have a ton of years to sit down and feel old and be like, man, I'm sore. I'm going to sit in a chair and grind out all this work. And I kind of got to experience a little bit of that when I got a marketing job and kind of sat in cubicles for a while and still got to do the graphic design, but it was, you know, regimented 6 months out of the year I was doing that. And then the other 6 months I was touring, and I kind of just went, I've got a taste of both right now. One is better than the other and I can make either work. So let's just do the fun one. Like why waste time right now doing that? But at the same time, there are other people out there that have the opposite view of like, I'd rather work hard now and then set myself up for success in the future, which I think either way, everyone's still doing that. I don't think there's any, right now, I'm still working hard. I'm still constantly grinding and doing tons of things. But they're all things that I personally like feel have value to myself rather than like, I'm helping someone else's company grow in X way or Y way. I just think it all comes down to experiences and how you experience life and how you want to take risks. And yeah, I think this is honestly, I love conversations like this because it kind of makes me think about all these things for a while after.
Well, I mean, so, and that's why I love just kind of going. Like my one note that I have was just talk about insomnia. Cause like I knew from there, we could go in a million different directions.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of things to that though. I mean, first of all, Kendall, I've only talked about that actually with my tattoo artist. It was my first episode. We're actually going to, for my 300 spoiler, but it won't be out until after this, or it'll be out before this. I'm having him back on to catch back up, basically. I mean, we're friends. We see each other all the time, but it was one of those where I was like, you know, not very often do you get to go back to literally the first thing you did and approach it. And like, I'm going to approach it very much like this, where it's like, we just have a conversation, we see where it goes, but absolutely. We've grown as people. So I'm sure we're going to talk about interesting things just like we always do. Mm-hmm. But in it though, he's one of the only people I know personally that went to Kendall. And as a tattoo artist, you know, he had his own sense of style and stuff like that. And so I'm going to pose the same question I asked him to you. I feel like going to school for an art of some sort, I feel like it almost beats the creativity out of you, because all you are doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're being shown examples of, you know, if you're actually going to school for like actual art, you know, like here's this artist, this is the style that they are in, here's why it fits in the style, here's why it's, you know, so great, it's timeless, whatever. But then they go, now make something like that. And then they critique you, or they'll tell you to make a painting, do this, it has to involve these colors, has to be this size, whatever the parameters are. And then they basically go, well, it's not good because of X, Y, or Z. And it's like, no. How the fuck can you tell me my art that I came up with myself and I put there is not good? It is like, you can't judge literal art, you know, as far as like paintings and so forth. I feel like you can't really judge it based on like, well, the lines aren't crisp here, you could have used this, or you could have, like, to me, it's like that negates what art is, which is all about creativity and the spontaneity of being inspired in the moment and seeing that all the way through. to me, I don't understand how one can go to school for an art and not have their creativity basically stifled in the process. And
Yeah.
either they earn the degree and are able to do a corporate version of an art job, or they come to the conclusion that fuck this is not what I want it to be, and they leave and go be fulfilled in their creativity elsewhere. What happened for you?
I would almost say somewhat. It was definitely the second, but somewhat less, because I definitely enjoy. So I really enjoy branding and just like creating like a logo and making everything look cohesive and nice. That was kind of my job at that marketing firm marketing job that I got. And I definitely kind of went into Kendall going like, my parents want me to go to college. They want me to give it a try. And I graduated early, so I have a year to kind of like I was saying, gap year, mess around and see what works. So I went to Kendall for 2 years, and I finished 2 years, and then the semester of my first semester, I took a printmaking class, and I took a couple other classes, a couple of like gen ed kind of classes, and then a typography class. And the type class, I definitely had issues with some teachers and how they taught and everything like that, but the type class, the teacher was he was so abstract that it ruined the class and ruined how I viewed Kendall. I mean, I didn't have a great view of it to begin with, because it was school and I didn't want to be there, and I didn't like the way that my classmates worked, and I didn't like the way that other people worked, and like I don't know. It's art, like you were saying, and there is like there are certain points. I think being a graphic designer is important if you're going to go to art school.
Okay.
Being an illustrator is not, because you can be an incredible illustrator just by going on YouTube and looking up like some of the fundamentals and stuff like that. Honestly, right now, being a graphic designer, you can go on YouTube and do the same, but it's a little easier to get that like base of here's how you like I can't go out right now and learn how to print on a large format printer because I don't have one with me. Whereas like at Kendall, they had one, and I could go use it and print out things for my band and like use the vinyl cutter and like I could go experience those things and make my own projects that I could then like, which also is another thing, like give us better projects that are more interesting. But yeah, like my type class, the professor would give us something and say like, okay, so here are your guidelines for the project. Bring this in next class with XXX. Like give us a couple examples, and I'd come in, and we brought in everything and all our projects, and we mounted them up. We printed them out on like a printer thing. And they wanted us to experience like the physical side of graphic design, which also was kind of a little bit of bullshit, because it's like some of our things we had to hand draw, and we're like, this is fine. Like I'm totally okay with drawing that. I can do that. But at the same time, why do you want me to design it on a computer, plan it out, or sorry, sketch it, design it on a computer and plan it out, and then draw it? Like why? That makes no sense. And like there were things where it's like we want you to be able to replicate fonts by hand, so like and like you can't trace them. And I was like, fuck off, what is that? Like why do we need to do? Either way, I'm getting on so many tangents.
No.
The type class, we brought things in, and he was like, okay, so you did this, you did this, you did this, you hit the things on the exam, but or on the rubric, but you didn't break the rules. Art's about breaking the rules. So I can't give you like he gave no one an A because we didn't like push the boundaries enough. And then the next class, everyone brought stuff in that like pushed little bits here and there, like because he obviously said don't like completely ignore it, but I want to show me that you know what I'm trying to teach you, but then also show me that you can make it your own. And we're like, okay, sure. So we bring things in, and the next class he goes, you guys didn't follow the rubric well enough. And I'm like, you said don't. You said don't follow this exactly. Like, you said give me something that's unique and your own, and we made it unique and we made it our own. And then you go, no, not that unique. Like, tone back the uniqueness. And then like if you are going to grade someone on something objective. Like, your line was intended to be straight, but like if someone's got literally 3 straight lines on a piece of paper, and that's their goal, is to get 3 straight lines, and one of the lines isn't straight, then like it's still good art. Like, someone might like that, but do you not know how to do that? Like, if you are trying to learn how to do that, let's teach you how to do that. Otherwise, this is fine. But like, I think that is kind of where art school comes in. Is like, I've had good teachers. I had 2 good teachers, and those were the teachers that said, bring something in, show it to me, and then tell me what you were intending to do with it and the things that you had struggles with, and we'll focus on those, rather than I thought this would have been better if this was this, because that's just subjective. Like, there's no way to quantify how like good this art is. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think art school can be valuable. For example, like me learning how to color separate shirt designs and like all these other things, but I didn't even learn that in printmaking, which is another thing. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot of people should experience. And if you don't know anything about art and you want to, going to art school is a good idea, because you will have a lot of resources to learn, and other people, and not just your teachers. Because I went in with experience doing designs for bands. Like the flyer I did for the show at your basement. I wasn't in Kendall when I did that, and like I just made that doing things that I wanted to do. So I went in with experience, and there were kids in my class that had never opened Photoshop before. They didn't even know that Adobe products existed. And me making friends with those kids, like, we shared things that we were learning, them going from the basics up, which I never did, and me coming from a place where I knew how to use the program, but I never went through the step-by-step basics and everything like that. So like, they would teach me shortcuts. I would teach them what filter galleries were, and what like Gaussian blur versus box blur and stuff like that. So I think the experiences are valuable, but at the same time, it all boils down to, yes, art school is bullshit.
It's funny because, I remember when Tyler and the Hollowfront guys were having an album release at the Stash, and they had just gotten their shirts. And at the time, I think I was still working for one of the bigger screen printing companies here in town that does stuff for like Diamond and a lot of PacSun and stuff like that. And he opens up the design, and I was there for an interview because like that was when like there was an EDM show in the basement. They were doing their CD release, and I think it was Guar and Light the Torch in the main room. And so I was there to interview the singer from Guar, and I was using the Stash initially, and then that's when everyone started coming in. It was really loud, and then Tyler was like really proud, like, "Yo, check out these shirts we just got for the album cover." And I remember looking at it, and
it was the one with the coffin that was like tilted,
I think it was like
right?
the coffin, hourglass kind of thing, I think. But see, now the thing is like, and just like after, let me finish one story and then I'll parlay it into the other thing for experiences though. So being someone who worked at a screen printing company and was a press assistant, I would have to set up all the screens. That's where I learned about separation of different layers, your different gradations, and even just more of how shirts get made and how you have to look at art instead of it being just a flat thing on a piece of paper, how it will look and lay on a shirt versus on a piece of paper, and different inks and how all that kind of stuff, matters. And it was one of those things I remember looking at. I was like, is it supposed to be like out of registration right there? And he was like, what? And I was like, right here. And I like pointed at it, and he goes, no. And I was like, well, whoever did that, call him back and tell him you want money back. Either they owe you money off of this, or they owe you like the next order, they're taking 50% off your next order for fucking this up or something like that. And he was like, can you do that? I was like, absolutely. And if you're going to be in a band, having had friends who tour and have merch people and all that kind of stuff, that's something where on my side of it, we've had a company go, this is slightly wrong. So we're not paying for this whole order, and you're doing another one, and you're going to expedite it, and we're going to take 20, 30% off what we owe on that. And we're keeping the garments and we're going to sell them. But it was one of those things where I was like, dude, absolutely. This is your business. These are literal physical garments or physical items that are going to represent your band that people are going to wear. Don't you want your band to be presented in the best possible way for you moving forward? And it was just like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And it was funny because that was an experience I had and learned from being on my side of it. But then also the side of listening and gaining knowledge from people who have been touring for a long time and just knowing that that's how the business works and the experiences and so forth. And it was one where, you know, I would assume at this point, you know, Hollow Front prop, you know, major props to them and you guys being one of the few that have made it out of this area. Because something I definitely wanted to hit on real quickly is it's gotten me into trouble because when I used to book shows, the thing that got me out of it was I got tired of the local egos.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was of the age that, you know, we had a scene. Grand Rapids had a scene back in the day. Like I used to come from Kalamazoo almost every Friday to come see the local bands. The local bands would sell out the main room of the intersection, which for those listening and don't know, I think at the time was maybe like 1,200. I think it's since expanded to I think about 1,800. But it was one of those where a 4-band local package would sell out the main room of the intersection Friday and Saturday nights, no problem.
And they could play both of those dates, and people would come out.
And it was one of those things to me where, you know, when I started putting on shows, I wanted to kind of help bring that back. I saw bands. I know a good band when I see one, or I can at least go, that band's willing to work harder. They may not be there yet musically, but they're going to get there, and they are working harder than everybody else. And it was one of those things where that's what I wanted. I wanted to kind of be a part of bringing a local scene back. And unfortunately, I felt like when you guys were coming out, it's like there was Seraphim really was the leader of the pack. They had great visuals. They all looked great. They had a very united like front on everything. They obviously spent the money in all the right things to do everything right. And I thought they were going to be the band that was going to get signed out of all of you guys. I didn't necessarily see you or Hollowfront doing it, but the funny thing is I feel like you guys looked up to them in the right way. I feel like a young baby band is supposed to, where you go, okay, like, what are you guys doing? Oh, I love how your music videos look good. Well, what we do is we don't put out a bunch of shit music videos. We save the money and we put out one good one.
See, the funny thing about it is we knew Seraphim. The show in your basement was like the first time we really like had met them, but by that point we were already going to be recording. We were already recording our new Lost in Dreams, basically. Right. And Lee, our producer, was the new guitarist of Seraphim, and actually I live with him. And I live with the vocalist of Seraphim, Jordan.
Wait, so you guys, did Jordan move? Because Jordan lives like just down the road from me.
Yeah, no, he lived with Lee, and we moved up to Comstock Park.
Okay.
But yeah.
Very local inside baseball there.
Yeah. We work together on a lot of stuff and a lot of music, and I help him with his Jordan's covers and everything, like design on that and everything. I think us just getting together and like Lee didn't have experience in one thing, and then Jordan had experience in one thing, Hollowfront had experience in some other things, and like we kind of built the team. Like Seraphim wanted to like up their design and stuff like that, so like they had me help them a little bit, and then like Ned Ingalls, the guy that does all our videos, was the guy to work with pretty much with Seraphim and Hollowfront and everything. And I think having a good team behind you is absolutely it, and Grand Rapids has some insanely talented people. So I think to your point, bands that come in and don't know what they're doing need that mentor. Like they need that person, doesn't like not necessarily a group, but just like they need that person to not have an ego and not say, oh, you want to be like me? Like you can't. Like,
Right.
yeah, like obviously don't copy bands. Don't go, oh man, they use this, I need to buy this. Like
Right.
they have this, like, can you give me this? Like, but like take what they're saying and apply that to your own music and your own art. I think that's what's really important is growing from another person's experience. Like, for example, there are people in Grand Rapids that were 100% out to rip you off, especially when the scene was like dying down a little bit and people weren't as connected. Because like you were saying, when shows were happening and it was like 1,200 cap sold out for local bands, like all these bands were talking. All these bands were like pretty close with each other. There were egos and there were things here and there.
There's
But
a
like,
hierarchy for sure.
yeah. But you kind of get into like this competitive, weird nature, and I think some people saw that they could take advantage of that, and eventually they started taking advantage of it as the scene started like slowly dying down, and then eventually it just like completely blew up and the scene was gone and all these people were just out to make money off of other people. And having that group like Seraphim, Sleepwaker, Drifter, Hollowfront, Northern at the time, Amora, all these bands, like those are the ones that we hung out with the most. We would all kind of talk and be like, okay, this person was great to work with. This was awesome. I loved this. If you want this type of thing, I would go here. If you want this type of thing, I would go here. Like, and all the creatives, me, Lee, Ned, and Jordan's girlfriend Alex, were all very open to our own styles and our own type of creativity, but also changing it up for bands that wanted to do something new. Like, or even just admitting like, we can't do that. Here's another person that can, and here's a person that's better. And our old guitarist Eric, he is probably one of the best photographers in Grand Rapids right now, in my opinion. And he works with tons of bands because we send them his way, and he's able to not make everyone look the same and learn what their brand is and how they're supposed to look and change that, rather than just doing, okay, we did this for Sleepwaker, here's what we're going to do for Hollowfront. So I think it's definitely having a group of people and a team, and it's a community, having a community that you can talk to and be confident in relying on for things. Without that, I don't think Sleepwaker and Hollowfront would have gotten to the point we're at. So to add to your point, yeah, if Seraphim wasn't there, then yeah, it would have been rough.
Well, I think that's like kind of the interesting thing is both you and Hollowfront, getting signed to the same label. I'm sure it was much closer to each other in actual, like, we're signing with this label, but the announcements came further apart.
Yeah. Oh no, actually we actually started talking to UNFD before Hollowfront got in contact, or they got in contact with Hollowfront, and we had demos basically for our album, and then Hollowfront had already had theirs like finished, and they were sitting on it for about a year. And they told them when they were releasing and all this stuff, and then they were just like, we're just going to put it out. Like, we haven't gotten anything back yet. So they put out their album, Loose Threads, before signing, and then eventually signed on and then re-released through UNFD. Right. And so it was kind of like, oh, you're talking to UNFD? We are too. That's really cool. And then we'll see if this happens. It was kind of like they happened in their own bubbles, but it was really cool to have it finally come around and come to fruition. And the fact that we all work with the same team is huge, because Hollowfront, or we did a music video with our friend Ned, and he got in contact with he had contact with UNFD through that, and then Hollowfront uses Ned too. So when UNFD was reaching out, they already had a rapport. They already knew what was going on and how everything was working. And like with Lee, we work with him. Hollowfront works with him for our release. He had more of like a hands-on, because Hollowfront had already released their stuff. He didn't really have to like communicate with the label and everything.
Right.
And now that Lee's in Hollowfront, like it's a big circle of really cool communication, and it's awesome to have this like unique pairing on the label, and I'm definitely glad it happened. But
well, I mean, that's like even talking to Mike the other day, or we released it a couple weeks ago, but talked to him about a month ago. Mike from Vatican, who's on the label too.
Oh yeah.
Like it was kind of funny because I was like, wait, you were in a band from like Indiana called like what was it, Church Tongue or whatever?
Yes, yeah.
And so I'm like, even though like by the time you guys were kind of starting to come around, that's when I really wasn't going to as many local shows anymore.
Mm-hmm. We played with them at Take Hold Fest.
Yeah,
the last Take Hold Fest. Yeah.
So it was one of those, like, it's funny that even though like for as much as I say like I don't really pay, like I don't feel like I pay as much attention to the younger scene that's coming up, but like after when I stopped like going to show, like not going to shows, but when I stopped booking shows, when I kind of stopped being and actively checking out the new bands, like, you know, chances are like on a tour, if it's like a package tour, I'm probably not the dude anymore coming to like sitting there for the whole fucking thing. I'm not going to check out first to four. I'm probably coming in like, you know, and it sounds really shitty to say like this, and I don't mean it to sound shitty, but it's the only tour I can think of at the top of my head. But it's like, okay, like, so that We Came as Romans tour, that
yeah.
To me, if I didn't know the dudes in Hollowfront, chances are I probably wouldn't get there until like Devil Wears Prada goes on. I'd probably be like, I'm gonna get there for Devil. Maybe I'll get there for like the last two songs of the other band. First band, that's when I'm gonna be across the street drinking for way cheaper than the venue prices. And it's just I mean, it sucks to be old and say it like that, but it's just kind of like I don't know, like do I like? Sadly, for me, a lot of music, you know, reminds me. And as I'm editing the episode that's coming out with Marcos from POD, you know, I was talking about how I don't feel like I listen to new music anymore. I listen to older stuff, and I try to figure out where that was inspired by, to then figure out like I go back to go forward. And so when I hear certain stuff, like I'm like, all right, you know, like I really like Counterparts. But I mean, Brandon and I, when we talked, like we joked that basically it's just Misery Signals with like a little bit more pop punk to it. Yeah. So I mean, and he flat out admitted that. He's like, we're just basically a Misery Signals cover band. And that's the problem I have with music as I get older, is I'm just like, oh, it sounds like this, but not done quite as good as the thing I like. So I'm just going to go listen to the thing I know I like that's going to satiate that itch for me. And I think that's the thing where at times, like, I realize I do need to have, you know, bands like Vatican, bands like you guys on the show to kind of challenge even myself to be like, okay, there's what I think you guys are, because I mean, you've fucking played in my house. Like, and if I'm going to be the asshole who will literally not go into my own basement and go check out a band that's literally here, then I'm a real piece of shit that does not deserve to like enjoy music. But it was one of those things, like I said, out of all the bands that I were coming out, and no disrespect to any of them, but like really it was you, Seraphim, and Hollowfront that I felt like had something that you would grow into if you didn't get in your own way. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were so many bands at that time, especially that were like,
they were all about the I Prevail sound, and something that I have talked about, and maybe you can actually speak to this a little bit more with me as we kind of wrap up. So I Prevail is one of those bands that, you know, everyone thinks of them as just the cover band. You know, they did the Taylor Swift cover. And to me, that was the Trojan horse, and they were the only band I've seen do that with a real plan behind it. It was like, okay, Taylor Swift didn't have any of her music on any of this on the platforms. So by them having a current hit on those platforms, instinctively, they're going to be the only ones that pop up when anyone searches for that. If you do it halfway decently, you're going to probably get some fans that are like, oh, this is pretty cool. Now, the part that everyone else who just kept releasing covers and hoping that people would find you, they came out with a whole fucking record like shortly thereafter that was ready to go, tours that were ready to announce. They had a whole rollout in planned, it seemed anyway. And that's the one thing I feel like everyone missed when they did it. And they're like, oh, they just did a cover and got huge. No, they did a cover smartly. And then
they put the work in and the money in to make it finalized and like pushed. Like that's I think that's one of the big things I mean, especially now working with bands, like doing designs for them and stuff like that. And I've worked with enough now that I feel safe saying there have been a few bands where they hit me up and they do this thing and they're like, yeah, we got this plan, this plan, this plan, blah, blah, blah. And then they put, like, I do all the stuff for them. They put it out and they're like, dude, not like, we don't see anybody. We're not seeing any money from this. Like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, you literally walked up to someone, gave them some art and said, oh, okay, here you go. That's all you did. Like, and honestly, it's like standing out on the street with like one of those boom boxes and screaming and just like playing your music. Like, a couple people are going to stop, but like hundreds of people are going to be passing by. Like, it's not to sound like a dick, but people just ignore music sometimes. People just aren't interested in like this thing or X thing or whatever. They want to see this music and have something to latch onto, like visually and like and not only that, you have to get that music in front of the right crowd. And when you're playing metal, like, you can't just put it onto Facebook and say like, okay, cool, grandma, listen to Facebook, because grandma's going to listen to it and go, oh, this is my grandson, and show it to her friends. And they're going to be like, what is this screaming music? Like, you're not making fans doing that. You're just putting music out into the void. So you have to have that plan. You have to have that marketing. You have to have all these things. And I think, yeah, a lot of bands don't understand that. And they just see the results of good planning and good marketing and the grind. But they don't understand how people got there. And that, I think, is where a lot of people start talking shit and having egos. Is, I don't know, I'm ignorant of this situation, and I think it's this way. And then eventually they get to that point, or they see someone else or a friend gets to that point or something, and they're like, oh, there's like 800 other factors that I had no clue went into this at all. So yeah, it's. I think that's the problem with the local scene. That when we were coming up, there were so many bands that thought they were hot shit and thought they were awesome and they could do whatever, and then eventually things didn't do whatever, and stuff kind of hit the fan, and they were stressed and upset that their music wasn't doing as well, and it just kind of weeded out the ones that didn't have that grind and that like willingness to put the money where it needed to go and put the effort in without it was like we had a lot of party bands. Basically, there were a lot of bands that were like, I'm in a band, it's local, but I get to party every weekend because I play a show every weekend at the same venue in my hometown with the same 4 bands. Why is no one showing up? We're playing the same set every night. It's the same thing. We're boring. Like, it's. I'm glad that the scene is getting recognition now, because it shows that people that put in work and actually plan things out are prevailing, I guess. Yeah.
I feel like that's the landing right there. You just
yeah.
It ain't gonna get any better than that. So we should just quit while we're ahead. I guess my last question for you, and then have you plug socials and all that. What do you want people to take away from Alias when they get to listen to the whole thing?
This is probably the first like full band collaboration that we've been able to have where everyone is involved in this in some way. Everyone put in an insane amount of work, and it's the reason we called it Alias is because we didn't want to call it a self-titled. So what's the best way to make something about your band and say like, put this out in front of you and say, this is who we want to be, and this is like the sound we're going for. I will admit that I think that this is probably just our transition album to the new sound and the new Sleepwaker. Well, that being said, like, this is the sound that we want to move forward with, but it's to say like this is the new identity that we have, and I hope that people kind of recognize that we're not 16 playing local show basements anymore. We're trying to make it work, and we're matured, and like we understand what goes into music, and we work hard. And I think that this album is the best culmination of that, of all our hard work and efforts. And I hope that people kind of hear that in the songs, and they take away their own meaning from the songs. And obviously we put a lot of personal stuff in there too. The song that we came out with, Distance and stuff, like that's specifically about Hunter's grandfather passing. And we have a couple other songs too that aren't out yet, that are very like personal and like nostalgic ways, or like references to things. We have a ton of Easter eggs throughout the album. So I guess, I just hope people recognize that the passion in the music.
Awesome. And then where can everyone find you and or the band or whatever else you would like to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on @Sleepwaker Band on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and youtube.com/Sleepwaker, or the UNFD YouTube. We also have our album coming out the 23rd. And you can pre-save that on Spotify.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. Yeah, you too.
So that was my conversation with Frankie of Sleepwaker. Again, I really want to take the time to thank him actually for just being so open and honest about a lot of stuff, and just being willing to kind of talk a little more abstract beyond just the actual album and the songs and so forth, and kind of talk a little bit more in depth about where some of these songs come from, where the band comes from. It sounds kind of tacky as I'm about to say it, to be like, there are some instances where I have bands on here, and maybe they're not as known as some of the bigger names that we've had. Frankie basically is following, through no fault of his own, Dee Snider and Dennis DeYoung. And those are musicians and artists who have been around for decades and inspired so many people. But sometimes I love having bands that maybe you don't know about, and you're going to get to hear stories that have inspired them, and get to know more about the band and some of the lyrics and so forth. And that maybe when you listen to the band for the first time, you're going to want to listen to it. You're going to take it all in. You're going to, remember a story maybe from this conversation, or something else maybe you've seen from the band, and really just kind of take it all in, because I feel like this is definitely one of those bands that they're doing something, and it's much more bigger than just we're a metal band. So I hope you do give their album Alias a fair shake. Check it out. I don't really know what they're doing as far as touring. That's still kind of all up in the air right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if Frankie and the guys are probably working on something. Him living with Lee Albright, who is, as you heard, a producer. He does a lot of stuff with a lot of the bands here in town. He's now the new guitar player for Hollowfront, as well as his busy production schedule. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're probably writing new ideas and just in writing already. I feel like that's the one thing that a lot of the bands that are geared for success, that are kind of coming out now-ish during the pandemic or so over the last year and a half, the good ones are taking the time to not rest on the laurels of, well, we got this record done, so I guess we're good. They're still writing, and they're pushing themselves to progress and advance their sound and their music, and being professionals, because essentially that's what they are now, as professional musicians. So want to thank Frankie again for taking the time and just talking with me. I could have talked a lot longer, but unfortunately I had another interview right after I got off the phone with him. Literally, I think I had about 2 minutes, and then I had to hop over to the other room to do another chat, but I'm sure we'll have him back on. Maybe some of the other guys from the band will come on eventually. So if you would like to keep up with Sleepwaker, it's simple. Sleepwaker Band, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Real easy. And you'll find links to order the record pretty much in every bio that they have over there. So super easy to go ahead and get you this new record. If you'd like to keep up with Frankie himself, he is at Instagram at sleepy_drummer, and on Twitter at his name, FrankieMish, Frankie Mish. And yeah, so going to wrap up this episode. Something new that we actually have launched since the last time I did one of these. We now have our Patreon relaunched. I've done a bunch of videos. I've done a bunch of Instagram, Facebook Lives, and all that stuff explaining it. Long and short of it, it is relaunched. We have a bunch of new content over there. You are going to get early access to all the podcasts, audio and video formats. If you actually would have subscribed about a week or so ago, you actually could have seen and heard this already before it even came out. We have a few different donation tiers. Tier 1, it's called the I'll Have One. It's for $1. It'll unlock exclusive episodes only heard on the Patreon feed, as well as a weekly breakdown of the weekly playlist that I've been putting together. And you'll also get thanked at the end of every episode. So right now I want to take a moment to thank Sarah Schneider and Craig Kent for being two of our first patrons. I'll probably throw in the old Lost episodes that I haven't posted, because why not? And I'm also going to be working on a side podcast that I think I'm going to put in there at the $1 donation, where basically I'm just going to go through once a week, maybe every 2, I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but basically just kind of give a thought or a few thoughts I've had listening to other podcasts. It was an idea I had for a side podcast called What I Learned from a Podcast, and I think it's just an intriguing idea where I talk about something that has stuck with me, because more oftentimes than not, those things carry over into the conversations I have for my podcast. So one informs the other, and I think it would just kind of be fun to carry on a deeper conversation about a singular idea that I've had or two from that week as well. If you go to the tier 3, it's called the Beer and a Shot. For a $3 donation, you'll unlock the audio from the most recent episodes before they actually get released. So if you would like to hear everything I'm doing well before it comes out, you can do that in that capacity. At the $5 donation a month tier, it's called Buy Around. You will unlock the video only from my most recent interviews as well before they're released on the normal feed. So just kind of a different way to get early access to what we're doing. As you know, a lot of times I'm doing these interviews well before you hear them, sometimes even a month or so before you hear them. So this is a way to either hear or see whichever you feel is worthy of your donation. And last but not least is we have the $10 per month donation tier, which is the regular status. If you go to the Patreon page, patreon.com/BREWspeakPod, you'll see a photo of Norm from Cheers looking at a beer, because when you think of a bar patron regular, who do you think of? It's Norm. Norm! But at this $10 donation, you'll unlock a seat at our table for our monthly Patreon hangout, where we will digitally hang out, have a water, a drink, cocktail, or 3, whatever, and we'll just kind of hang out and shoot the shit. We might play some Jaxbox games that I've been seeing a lot of people doing on their hangouts and so forth, and Twitch streams, and they've been a lot of fun. So, and obviously at any donation, whether it be the $3 to the $10, everything obviously unlocks the tiers before it. So if you're to the $10 tier, you get everything that you would get from tiers 1 through 3. So already, like I said, had 2 patrons come on. Very excited about it. Very excited to get some feedback. Really excited to create some new content for you guys, if the show is not enough for you. So again, one more time, that is patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. Much appreciated. We just put up the interviews that I did with Sean Cooper of Taking It Back Sunday and Justine Jones of Employed to Serve. Those are up, as well as the next 2 to 3 episodes with Maddie Mullins from Memphis Mayfire, Andrew Michael Wells of Idola. A lot of stuff up in there, so go check it out. Much appreciated. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast, simple enough, you can go to brewspeakpod.com. That is the landing page for everything this show, anything you need to know about us, including our sponsors, which I'm going to run through those real quickly before I get out of here. Rockabilia.com, head on over there, use our code BREWtally, and take 10% off your total purchase order. Want to thank Rockabilia for always making sure to take care of our listeners with an extra discount code. Again, BREWtally at checkout will save you 10%. On Point Pomade, keep your beard and hair looking on point. Use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard. Go to beanbastard.com, pick up some delicious coffee. And if you live in the Buffalo, New York area, or you're just traveling through, go check out their store in the downtown Buffalo, New York area and support those guys and gals. And I'll see you all next week, where the returning Maddie Mullins joins us to talk all things, well, you'll just have to stick around and find out. Talk to you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think? Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about no?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.